just saw, like
Yep.
on stage, and you can have a conversation with them if you want, and you can not just buy their stuff from them, which is great. They would appreciate that, but you know, have a conversation. Hey, I like that tune. Or it's like, oh, you did that. You know, you did Neil Young cover. I love Neil Young. You know, kind of thing. Like, and you can like have these actual like human to human moments, and it sustains you like as the person, you know, checking out the show and buying the record. It sustains them too, especially if they're touring, because touring can be a very lonely thing, and you go from community to community and you hope to get something out of it, not just money, although money is good and that's kind of what you need to keep touring, but you get, like you said, a better level of nourishment, other than I have friends and, you know, acquaintances who operate at the higher level of the music industry, and they go from bus to green room to stage to holding area to meet and greet, and you know, they make good money, they make a great living off of that. But having witnessed some of that firsthand as well, I think like, okay, is this better? Financially it is, but like, is this better to you as a human being? Like, major label, major company meet and greets are very organized. It's almost like a cattle call, and people paid for it. Like, as opposed to a more organic conversation where, and I've had this with, you know, famous people as well as, you know, just regular people. It's like when you go outside the venue, maybe they're hanging out outside to get some air, and you can have a conversation there too. When I used to play, I would go outside almost immediately after playing the show just to get some air and get clear. And someone might come out and be like, "Oh, hey, I saw you in there," and then get into a very nice one-on-one conversation, you know, on the streets of New York City, with a complete stranger, and that's sustainable for both of us. Like, that sustained both of us, and it's a great feeling. You got to do it one at a time.
And I think if we get people to shift their thinking to like, not just, I mean, popularity has a downside and herd mentality has a downside. Like, sure, everybody has that, you know, paradoxical, I want to be the king of pop or the king of rock. And, you know, Michael Jackson's, Rihanna, you know, Beyonce, and that's fine. But what we're trying to do is diffuse that power down a little bit more and rehumanize it to where we maybe have a closer connection to the artist, because then their art is more affected by us and less by the corporate, by the profit, by the commoditization of the art. It's more real and it's more authentic. Like when Adia Victoria was on stage, she actually came down from the stage and she started dancing with a few people, and I was lucky to be one of them. And I just felt like a lot more like this is sort of anyone else I might have played with,
Yeah.
Dan, like the people we played with on stage. Again, I just felt like I'm participating in the art.
Yeah.
And I felt like, you know, something different than sitting up when we used to, I worked a job where we had luxury boxes up in at that point, changed names so many times, Wachovia Center, what's it called now? Wells Fargo Center. I don't even know what they call it in Philly. But you know, those are fun too. Eric Clapton, Billy Joel, you know, Garth Brooks, like, you know, but it's like the diet. It's like, you know, it's that's sort of like your almost like your dessert, because it's like, okay, well, yeah, these guys are hugely popular. They're in a place in their career where they can come out and do almost anything, and just seeing them do it. And if they've lost their voice, it's still fun to hear them play the songs because they're them, you know. But just to be conscious that that's what you're doing, you're kind of admiring from a popularity standpoint. Like, sure, do you really appreciate their music? Do you really get into it? Does it move you? Yes. But if you also look for people closer to you that you can possibly connect with at venues like upstairs at World Cafe Live, Johnny Brenda, some of the ones we're mentioning, I know there's venues all over this nation, in every city and probably even towns. You know, where you could like Ardmore Music Hall, like it's intimate enough that you could, you know, have more human contact. And then for us to also have the mentality to show some financial support, not a ton, but even if everyone just did that $10 cover or that $15 cover, it goes a lot further than it feels like it goes if we all start doing it.
And also as artists, as the artist side of me, because I do, you know, I do partake in that side of it as well. I think is another thing that has made me a better interviewer is that like I can talk to a songwriter. I can talk to. I've worked in so many different aspects of the music world that like I immediately have a point of view and like I can immediately dial in with someone if they're an artist or a booker or a talent buyer or a producer or something like that. I'm just like, well, we have some shared experience right here, and away we go. But I think it's on us, uh, our responsibility to then also like give the best thing that we can give, to not fall into the trap of being like, well, it's local and like people might not be expecting, you know, national major label level of a show. That's BS. You should go out there and you should swing for the fences.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you're you're not going to you're not going to have the money to have, you know, Beyonce's light show and stage setup, but you're a human being just like she is, and just like any of these other huge major national international artists are. You can still go out and, like you said, like with the artist coming down off the stage and engaging with the audience, you can still connect with the audience, and that doesn't cost anything.
Yeah. I when you were just talking, I was thinking of Bill Hicks' comedy routine. I want my rock stars dead.
Yeah.
Like they're blowing their brains out on the stage. Like play from your heart is one of his famous routines. And I always just said, this is the one place where nothing matters. Like just absolutely give it my all. And I try to hit the stage like that every time, because we as human beings need to start realizing we're a lot closer than we think. Like just because you're not Michael Jackson or you're not Beyonce doesn't mean that what you have to offer is a valid human expression.
Yeah.
Of course, there's going to be people that, you know, please more people with their work. But if we're all in the process of doing our best, I mean, open mic is kind of the entry level of, you know, just getting, you know, you create a work musically, and then you get out there and you put it out in front of the public. And most people are pretty appreciative of that process. And, you know, it's built in so that some open mics do one song or two or three, so that, you know, if it's not so great, you're on to the next act. And you can go to an open mic and see total beginners, in betweens, and then you can see some people that you think are better than some of the popular people.
Yeah, yeah. I think of Fergie's Pub open
Yep.
mic, Philadelphia. Just one small example, and I'm sure there's an analog of Fergie's Pub open mic in every city in town, in this country.
Right.
That's like, yeah. I would walk into that room. It was always a good hang. It's my buddy Alex Stewart, a singer songwriter himself, got me to go to it for. Well, got me to go back to it. I hadn't been in years, not since I had been in bands. He got me to go back to it as a solo artist by just telling me, he's like, "Nah, man, it's a good hang," and that's like, that got me. I was like, I like a good hang.
Yeah, that's all it took.
Like,
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, for like when I used to work in the clubs, the one club that I worked at Tuesday night was open mic night, and I didn't usually work Tuesday nights, but I worked on a few. And I'll tell you, I made the least amount of money because there wasn't as many people there, but I also had the most fun on a Tuesday night too. It was a really good time. And you really saw, like you said, you saw people running the, you know, from the one end of like a total beginner to somebody who was like, hey, I need to, you know, work out some chops. And I remember I saw an interview with, I forget which, it was a comedian. I saw or heard an interview, and they were talking about where, you know, a famous comedian, you go back down and you play the clubs and, you know, you work out your material. And it's, you know, it's similar to music because it's something that you've created, that you've honed, and that you want to see how this plays out and how it goes over. And, you know, when they're working out I think it might've been a Jerry Seinfeld, but like, you know, working out the jokes, you want to see how that plays there and with that small audience before you go on the Tonight Show and do that bit and it falls flat.
Yeah.
And about community too, and about arting small when it comes to the open mic. We use that as an example. You're less about That's less about a community. I mean, it includes like just regular people. There are regular people who just go out to open mics. They're not playing. They don't really know anybody who's playing. That's always been an interesting demographic to me. I was like, wow, like you're just incredibly open and supportive, and you you're willing to like really get down there and see some adventurous stuff. I'm like, or maybe you just kind of don't care and it's all just music to you. That's a whole other thing that I could think about. But the community there, that's artist to artist right there. And when John talked about like you see people of all levels of skill and experience, I always had a good time rolling in there, doing my thing, you know, for what it was. Some nights it was good, and some nights it wasn't as good as I would have liked it to be. But then, like sitting down with someone like Ross Belenois, who's like a known singer-songwriter in the area and a producer, and he's toured. And then like having a discussion with him, I'd be like, oh, you know that song that I brought out tonight. I don't know how I feel about the chorus length, you know. And then you can just talk shop. Boom, you have someone right there to just be like, yeah, well, you know, here's some way you can think about it or something like that. That is so valuable to the community, to arting small, is like being able to access each other and improve and make a better community. And that's the thing I've always loved about open mics. And then being that person for someone else maybe who like comes in and is just like, oh, you know, I butchered that bridge right there. And then, you know, we get into a conversation about how one practices and things like that. That's, you know, I don't know. You can get that on the internet. You can go to YouTube videos and you can watch instructional videos on how to play the guitar or play the piano or whatever. But there's something to really just sitting with someone else and just being like, well, here's how I do it, you know.
Yeah, or I would even think too, if you're somebody who's maybe a little bit shy about, you know, you can sit there and you could practice in front of your guitar teacher. You could practice in front of YouTube and, you know, rewind as much as you need to. But until you get up on that stage and you have to look at other people out there, you know, peers or fans or just, you know, people that are there, you know, there's a piece to the performance aspect of it too that you don't get in front of just the one other person who's giving you direct feedback and teaching you something, or, you know, from a television set in front of you that you probably bought on Amazon.
I always think of it as there is a physiology when you're performing on stage. I believe that you are creating physiological echoes in the audience that are going on. You're all sort of partaking in this. It's almost at times a spiritual experience. When everybody's into the vibe and it's going well, it almost becomes like a speaking in tongues thing. And that's happening in physical proximity. The full connection between human beings requires, if you want the most complete and whole connection between human beings, it requires physical presence. So think about being with your significant other, if you guys are in relationships, and only ever seeing them on Zoom.
Yeah.
What if you had to live your entire life and you never got to see them in person? Wouldn't you feel something's lacking?
Yeah.
So, you know, if we keep doing music like more and more and more away from the human element, I just think that we're dehumanizing humans when we dehumanize music too much.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of the goals that I have with the podcast and all that, is just to not just have it be this little 5-minute digestible bit, this 10-minute digestible bit of like, here's the new single and there it is and they're great and bye. Like, I want to get into it. Like, where did you come from? Who gave you your first guitar? What were your first piano lessons like? What was it like the first time you went out and played songs for people? You know, how did you get a record deal? How did you hook up with this more successful artist to go on tour with? What do you think about all that in the end? Like, here's the human being who has, you know, all the same depths and everything that you and I have, and whether they're known or whether they're lesser known, it doesn't matter, because the story, there's a spirit to every single one of these stories that is worthy of your time. And just because you've never heard the music before or never heard the name before, it doesn't mean that there's not something valuable to get from this. And that's, you know, that's why I love periods when to get into like the more technical aspects of like running a podcast. Well, I'll go look at my numbers periodically. Like, you know, I have a place that compiles that for me. And sometimes I'll look and I'll be like, oh, you know, such and such episode from 2 years ago got, you know, 30 downloads over the last couple of days. And I'm like, wow, someone into this one artist that I had on a year ago, 2 years ago, or 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and just like said like, oh, what's that about? And I try to keep the episodes as evergreen as possible. Obviously, when you're in the music world, people are promoting things, a single, a record, a music video, blah, blah, blah. And we will talk about that. That's because that's what they're the most excited about. That's the thing that they really want in that moment, what they want people to see. But if you're an artist with a deep catalog or with a large body of work, I'm just like, I want it all out there for them. And I want someone to be able to listen to this conversation 3 years from now and, go find that music video that we were talking about that was new, and also just listen to it and just be like, wow, cool. Never thought about, relationships with bookers the way that this artist talked about it, or never thought that like this is how I could even make a music video, because maybe people don't think they can do that, and someone can kind of lay it out to you and be like, oh, you do this and this, and that's how you make a music video. Sort of demystifying, a lot of the aspects of the industry. That is something I like to do, and just sort of just making everyone people.
Absolutely. The interdependency theme in the citizen body, you need the heart, you need the lungs, you need the brain, you need all these organs. You can't have just one. Same thing with the community, any community you break down. So the music community, without a venue, no place to play. We kind of maxed out the online thing. It's not going to carry us forever.
No, but it has carried us, and there are people I think who are doing it very, very well. And I think the spirit of what some people have accomplished over the last year with the virtual streaming and all that, I think there are aspects of that can live on.
Oh yeah.
Like look at what a place like Ardmore Music Hall was doing, where they were just like live streaming entire concerts in there with no audience, or with a very limited audience.
Yeah.
Or if you look at it from a national level, something like Trey Anastasio's series of concerts out of the empty Beacon Theater for 6 weeks. There are, obviously, it's not the same, but those kind of things have the potential to reach more people in an important way. Yeah, there's something a little disconnected about, sitting in a room and watching something happening live. But, people get super into sports, watching basketball and all that, and they're not there, but they still feel, involved. They still feel, it's impactful for them. So I think there are aspects to like what we have figured out over the last year, sort of a trial by fire type of situation, that can hold forward going forever. Yeah. And I think they will enrich both the larger music community and the smaller music communities. I think that there are definitely some real tenets that we can learn from that.
Definitely.
And I think really too, just staying involved, because we're talking about like our favorite venues, and those are some of the larger venues. And I remember I saw a duo at a club, and I can't remember the name of it now, but I remember reading online and being really sad. Like I started to follow the venue on Facebook, and they just closed down. And I think it had the name Boot in the
Boot and
Saddle.
Boot and Saddle.
Yeah.
Guys, that's a nail in my chest right
there.
That's
a heartbreaker. Yeah, that's a big one.
They were talk about art small.
Yeah.
I lived in that neighborhood for 10 years. I now live in an adjacent neighborhood to that. It's still not that far, but when they opened up, I was so excited that there was a small cap room that I could walk to in 5 minutes from my apartment door. And the people running it too were the people who had been involved in some real DIY groundwork in this city on a music level for years going before. They were, they were the people bringing in like regional and national indie bands, DIY touring bands that the majors wouldn't touch. There was no financial incentive for, a larger company to work with some of these bands. But they built a network, not just within Philadelphia, but networked nationally, to be like, kind of like what it was, Suzanne, when we talk about the 80s and 90s, where, there was a network, sort of an underground, a separate thing working alongside the major thing. And it was sustainable.
Yeah, I felt like I stepped in a time machine when I went into that club, and in a good way. I just felt like it just took me back to a place in time where it was like, well, this is what it used to be like.
So
and
it was a
for what's that?
Yeah, I was going to say it was a resurrection of the original Boot and Saddle, right, Dan? Like from
They used to be a was a honky tonk bar. It was a country western bar. I have a friend of mine who's in his 50s or 60s right now. I won't out him by name. I don't remember how old he is. But he tells me about going to see like in the 80s and early 90s when it was Boot and Saddle, like a country western bar, going and seeing bands like Driving and Crying and stuff like that, like there, and like having a great time. So like it was always an outlet, a small local outlet to have national bands come through and also to have area bands play through, and it just really broke my heart when they went down. Now they did it in a way to sustain the larger a larger Philadelphia venue that they also operate, that being that being Union Transfer, which is a much larger capacity room. And I understood that because also when you want to get to the logistics of COVID and how we're going to have to move forward, a bigger room is better than a smaller room. You can put less people in a bigger room.
Yeah.
But those are the, like, going back to Suzanne and John, what we were saying at the beginning, like, how would I make these decisions, if I was the guy in the driver's seat for this? And again, my answer is I don't know, but I think that they made the best decision that they could. And I think they'll be back, like maybe not in that particular locale and maybe not in the exact same way, but talk about a group that is doing it right and does it community minded, does it art small, business small minded. That's the group that owned and operated that venue. They'll be back because that's just what they'll do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
good to hear. I didn't know that. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I don't back. They'll be back. Like I'm not. I'm just being like super optimistic right
Yeah.
here. But people like that who operate with that ethos in mind, with that philosophy in mind, they will always be successful. Like they will always find a way to make it happen because they have things that maybe some of these larger national, multinational groups don't have. They have the community with them. Like they have the, they've got the spirit of the people, if you want to speak about it in like a revolutionary type way. They've got us on their side, and I will, donate to them. I will help them in whatever way I can, long before I would ever consider helping some of these larger, national or multinational entertainment groups that want to buy up warehouses and create the illusion of it being a smaller venue, a local venue, when really in the end we're just like, it's all coming out of the same places. That's a whole other discussion that like I can get like super cranky about.
But it does tie in, Dan, like the shop small ties into the art small.
Absolutely.
It's all about directing our power to the smaller entities and closer to the humanity. It does more than just direct the dollars, but it directs the dollars power, the political power then that goes along with the dollars, and also the human interconnection. So it really accomplishes a lot. And whether you're doing it just when you're buying a hoagie or you're buying a cup of coffee or you're going out to get entertained, it all builds us stronger as the citizen body as opposed to some corporate entity.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And it just, that's one of the things that I loved about Philly, even when I first moved here in the earlier 2000s, before we sort of had our Philly Renaissance, our like post 2010, 11, 12, Philly Renaissance, when skyscrapers were going up and now everyone wants to live here. And I love that. I don't, like, I say it in a sardonic way sometimes where I sound again like a cranky punk, but like I like living in a place that people want to go to. Like, why wouldn't I like that? But when I think about when I first got here, one thing that I remarked upon probably my first year was like, there are not as many chains here as I thought there would be. Like, they exist, of course. Philadelphia's a major market, and other cities out there are major markets. You're going to get national and multinational chains that show up. But Philly felt like, hey, there is as much relevant going on that is based out of here as there has been, brought in, cookie cutter shape and thrown up in a building. And I still think it's there. I think we sometimes bemoan that, like, oh, the city's not the same, the neighborhoods aren't the same, this place is like this, South Philly's like this, Fishtown's like that. Yeah, but that's also life right there. That's just an evolution of anything. But like, there are still so many valid, great things. There are more small venues now in this city than there were when I got here. And fingers crossed that like we still maintain that as we sort of turn the corner as a nation and as a world right now, where we can start getting people back together again. There are more opportunities. And there are more people willing to support it. So, you know, I try and be optimistic. It doesn't always vibe with my demeanor sometimes. But
No, but that's why we thought Philly's the perfect place to start the citizen body, because you know the nation started here. Roxborough, the section I'm in, you can go to a small hardware store. It's thriving. We have a couple smaller banks. They're not the smallest in the world, but they're small. The coffee shop, you know, the pizza places, like you can do it all almost right here. You can walk to it, and a lot of it's in walking distance. And we think that if people just start focusing, you know, on how much of that they can do themselves, even in the suburbs, then it becomes a mindset. As that becomes a mindset, then it becomes a cultural phenomenon. Because right now, I think a lot of people agree with it in sentiment. Oh yeah, shop small. Yeah, I'm real big. But when they really look at their day, it starts looking a lot more like, you know, jumping on Spotify. And not that Spotify's a bad guy, but it's not the best for the artists.
no, it certainly isn't.
And it's not the best for you know, the human connection. So it's just when we start doing this together en masse, the power really does go back to the people.
Oh, absolutely.
We don't mean like power like we're going to take you down or we're going to have a coup, but it's just organically, naturally, the way your body does it. All the cells are getting everything they need. It's all cooperating together. These cells aren't against these cells, and this organ system isn't against that organ system, and there's no giant like robot controlling our body. It's just all happening like on its own volition. So that's kind of the vision here, and the art piece of, you know, what we do is just huge, because that's just the place where it starts to connect you back into the spiritual.
Yeah.
And then when the spiritual starts to line up as a oneness, then you're really getting somewhere.
Yeah. That's just sort of an analog of like the DIY ethos that has existed in music for a long, long time. It's like, if people think more stereotypically about like, you know, like the punk DIY ethos of the 1980s, before we talk about even like sound and genre and that being like sort of codified into like, this is what this kind of music sounds like, the ethos was, what can we do within our community to raise all of us up? Like, there's plenty for all of us. How about we, you know, start by building your community and then opening your community to people from other communities. And that's, you know, that's how the DIY, like sort of the classic DIY 80s underground music scene started. Small labels, small companies, small bands booking small shows. And some of those small bands, like, you look at them now and you say names like Black Flag and X and, you know, the Go-Go's. Yeah, like those were all small bands at one point. You know, the Bangles were a small band before, you know, they got big. And those artists were able to grow, and the communities and scenes were able to grow through, like we said, arting small and shopping small, keeping your stuff within that world. And that's how it starts. It's worked for years, and now that we have the internet and sort of this mass communication way of really being able to reach out to each other, if we use that tool properly, and that's, you know, we could debate for hours on what's the proper way to use that or what's the effective way to use that. But if we use that tool properly, there's nothing we can't do, and we're not going to make $1 million, but we're not going to starve, hopefully. So, you know, that in the end is what you're going for.
I think an easy takeaway for this podcast is, if everyone tries to find one local act, a band, a comedian, a visual artist, you know, a dance company, just try to find one, and in your collection, in your favorites, in your music, like, just start looking. I mean, Kalani Baylor is already a favorite of mine. Just found her a couple weeks ago because she came on our program. and you know they are out there and they're right around you, and you might be meeting them in person, or when we do get back out to these venues, maybe they're on your list to go see. But you have to take the time to do that, you know, and that's not that hard. I mean, and hopefully your podcast, Dan, is a resource. Citizen Bodies featuring an artist. Sometimes it's visual. It could be dancer, it could be comedian, it could be a band. Every week, we're only 4 weeks into this, but we feel like putting that out there, it's going to help people. It's going to make it easier for them to do that.
Absolutely. No, you guys are doing great work, and
Thank
well, I mean,
Thank you.
Not sure if anyone knows about it yet.
that's how I started out too. For the first
Yeah.
couple of years, I would sit there and just be like, you know, I think of the Pink Floyd from the Wall. Is there anybody out there? Like, is
Yeah.
there, you know, can you hear me right now?
And but you know what? We had somebody like you that's willing to sit here with us for a couple of hours and take a
Yeah.
chance on us. And you know, somebody did that for you in the very beginning as well. And we've had a couple of our other, you know, artists, like we've had Peace Ike, we've had Sharia Wallace, Tom Porbandith, you know, people that said, yeah, I'll sit down and talk with you too, and just, you know, kind of foster that community spirit.
Yeah.
It's how it's done.
Absolutely. And I like a good talk too.
Yeah,
John.
we appreciate it, Dan. I was really pleasantly surprised that you had the time to come on here. So thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. Keep doing what you're doing, and it'll like it grows so slowly, and then one day you'll look up and you're just like, how did I get here? But like at the time it just seems so excruciatingly slow and weird, and am I even getting anything done?
Is everyone just laughing out there?
Well,
Well, look, at the very worst, we're giving everyone a laugh, right?
Yeah.
right.
All right. So give us John, you know what, you haven't you're also in the music scene. Give us a recommendation of somebody. Dan gave us a few good ones. Give us somebody that you said, I want my friends to know about this.
I don't want to insult. I don't want to insult the people that really are in the music scene, aka community, as I like Dan's reference to it, with considering myself to be in it right now because I'm more of an open mic attendee. But
okay.
I mentioned Kalani Baylor. I mentioned well, there's one band, my favorite band, that broke up, and they were called Paper Trigger. You don't remember Paper Trigger, do you, Dan?
I don't recall. No, it's possible. I've probably forgotten more things than I remember.
Yeah, they were. I was trying to be their drummer, and I was going to manage them. They were so good, but they just broke up. You know, the typical thing. Right now in Philly, I mean, people probably know about Ben Arnold, but Ben's been making a living touring in Europe. He's right here, usually at goes to the open mic at Dobson Street Pub, which is right in Manayunk and close by here. Very intimate setting, but great beer, great food, really just a loyal crowd. That's where I used to do my open mics. And so I would say if you haven't checked out Ben Arnold and you like sort of, you know, almost like I know he hates the comparison to Lou Reed, but
it's not off though. Like, yeah, that's a really apt comparison.
Yeah. Well, for our younger, I always try to remember the younger listeners. Lou Reed was in a band called the Velvet Underground before he went solo, but he was really like what would you call? Well, how would you describe that genre, Dan?
Sort of a pre-punk, pre-art rock type of.
Thank you. I'm terrible with the genres, by the way. I have no idea, you know, when I'm describing stuff. I'm like, oh, that's rock, you know, or rap, you know. But
there's only two.
But so I would say check out definitely Kalani Baylor on Sound. She doesn't have a website, but she's on Sound. What the heck's got? What's it called?
SoundCloud.
SoundCloud. Thanks. Just escaping SoundCloud. Speaking of clouds, but as KB Sunshine, but she goes by Kalani Kaloni Baylor Baylor. And I think Ben Arnold deserves a mention for his long term. She's like a real newcomer, and he's like a fixture on the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people who have gotten a chance to open for him and stuff like that, and people from the area that he's taken out on tour with him, you know, using his power as a recognized artist to, you know, bring out some other talent from the area. And I love artists who do that, who say like, well, I'm not just going to let my you know, label company dictate to me like how I'm going to play and who I'm going to take out on the road. I'm going to take someone from my community out on the road, someone that like he probably has a relationship with, like, you know, maybe you only met them a couple times or has known them for a long time. So I think it's important as you grow within your community to continue to, you know, help and foster your community. That's how it works. Because, you know, if you're no good at home, then like, what's the point?
Ben would probably kill me for this, but I was lucky enough to play for him. Like he shows up at Dobson Street Pub, and I get on a drum kit, and I've backed him up once or twice with his music.
Right.
And it was great. And I think of, and this is where I say he'd probably kill me, as Dobson Street Pub is to Ben Arnold as the Stone Pony is to Bruce Springsteen. Like the place he kind of goes back to and just you know plays like without any kind of plan or anything. And to be able to make that kind of connection, like I know this guy's touring in Europe. I know he's been making his entire living in music for what, probably 25 years or so, maybe more. Is just a really cool thing that gives other people connection into how they may be able. It's easier to figure out how you may be able to bridge the gap from open mic to starting, you know, to get your music out there, to start making some kind of living on it, playing and knowing Ben Arnold, than it is like if you are just watching like Michael Jackson and saying like, well, how did he get from here to, you know, international superstar? You know what I mean? Like there's an easier path to see when someone who can is just making a living doing it, you know,
An accessible person that you could even just straight up ask.
Exactly. So those are my suggestions along with everybody else. And I'll try to find a way, maybe in the YouTube video, to put links to all these people that Dan mentioned and I mentioned. And, you know, Sue, I don't know if you have any.
So, I've got Brew Review has always been my favorite, my go-to since.
Are they still active at all?
You mean at the COVID moment, or?
Well, I meant just
in the last 30 plus years.
Yeah, well, like before COVID, like were they doing anything?
They were. They played a Thanksgiving show, a Christmas show every year,
okay.
And they would also do some sporadically. They did one like a few years back. They did something in the springtime. It was like an outdoor thing in Delaware County. I can't remember. I mean, it was like a parade near Media. They'd played the Media Theater. They would go up to the Sellersville Theater. So, and you know, like it might just be one show at the Sellersville Theater in May, and it was called the Spring Tour, you know, because it was one show. And so they would play occasionally. They had a little breakout Baru Power Trio. That was where I saw them at the Boot and Saddle, where it was their singer, one of their guitar players, and they teamed up with Bodycast and Sal Tomasello, and they put together like a great set. It was really enjoyable, and that's where I actually saw their opening act. That's what kind of like took me back in time, where it was you'd see a musician, you know, piggyback or open up for somebody, and you go, it just opened up a whole new set of doors to you. And it was two girls, and they were twins, and they were young girls, and their names were something like Layla and Kalani.
Oh yeah, they're from
they're local, I think, aren't they?
From Wilmington? Or I could be totally mistaking them for someone else. Like that's the detriment of doing what I do sometimes, is that a lot of information like rolls through my head, and I try and keep it all in the right. Inevitably do not keep it all in the right place.
Yeah, but it was girls. They were twins.
I know who you're talking.
And they both played every instrument on the stage. Like they would take turn. Like one was on keyboards, one was on guitar. Then one might take over like on the drums, and the other one would go on key. Like they'd switch around on their instruments. They had beautiful voices, and they opened up for that. And I was like, wow, you know, I'm so glad I made it in time for the opening act. And wow. they were incredible. So I think it was Layla and Kalani or Solani. I really, really, really wish I could remember the name, but they were incredible. So I would say anybody looking to find like singer-songwriter, original music, you know, rock, but mostly acoustic. I would recommend the two of them. and then a lot of the other players in Baru have done things like, I know, Greg Davis plays with Dave Warsikanen's In the Pocket, along with a lot of other, Philadelphia musicians from, current times and, more into the 80s and 90s time frame as well. But I remember one of my favorite things to see, and I really meant when COVID first started, I said to myself, please, please, please don't let this affect E.J. Simpson's show that he puts on. It's at that church in Philadelphia, the oldest church in Philadelphia. And he would play Jesus Christ Superstar and make it a one-man show.
Yeah. EJ, and like I knew about EJ long before I even thought about moving to Philadelphia, because he was in this group called Maggie Pearson EJ.
Mm-hmm.
To get pushed on college radio, and I worked for college radio, so I remember hearing those records in the very early 2000s and thinking they were this cool kind of indie folk band. Flash forward to years later when I'm meeting people in Philadelphia, going out to see someone else play, and he's there, and my buddy Dan Nishaney says oh yeah, that's EJ something, and I go, is that EJ from Maggie Pearson EJ? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh wow. He's like, yeah, you want to meet him? And just drags me over there. He's an amazing talent.
And he's incredible.
I've hooked up with him at Dobson too. That's a lot of guys come through there because Russell, what is the guy's name? Eisenlohr.
Yeah. God, I used to play shows for him when he was booking out of Roxbury, a place called the Blinkin' Lincoln, which just seemed to shift locations constantly. It was sometimes it was in this art gallery space, sometimes it was a bar, sometimes it was somewhere completely different. I played a bunch of great shows for him and saw a bunch of great shows that he would bring through. He'd bring through regional and smaller national touring acts and stuff like that. He's still active in the Roxborough area.
Pre-COVID, he was a fixture that I would see him at the open mic every time I went to Dobson. Yeah.
I haven't seen him in years. I haven't talked to him in years, but
he landed at Dobson, and I don't think they call it Blinkin' Lincoln there.
No, they don't. That was sort of his that was his deal back in the earlier pre 2010 or just into the early teens. I don't know what we call periods of time anymore, but
I know.
I think it's an era, maybe. I don't know.
It's just funny, and that's the joy of a good music community, is that someone can throw a name out and people who've been around for a little bit just be oh, I know them. That's joy. It's a joy I take from realizing that oh, it's big. Philadelphia's a big market, and there are people who live in bigger markets that might feel overwhelmed. But really, when you get down to it, the people actually doing the work, the people actually making things happen. And I'm not really talking about myself. I'm talking about all the other people who surround me. That crop of people is much smaller than you think it is.
Yeah. Well, this is all really making me want to get out again. But if we can't get out, then I'm going to try to find some more local acts. So hopefully we can help some other people do that too. And I'll see if I can find those links, and featured artists. If anyone wants to suggest them to us, citizenbody.com, send us an email. If you like somebody in Philly, doesn't have to be Philly, but Philly is good. Send us an artist and send us a video or something. We'll check it out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So again, this is the Citizen Bodycast, and with John Katrina, and our special guest today was Dan Drago from 25 O'Clock Podcast. And it's been fantastic having you on. I'm looking forward to the 200th episode. It should be coming up from when, right now it's March of 2021. And we're looking at that coming up within the next couple of months.
Yeah, mid-May it should drop. In fact, I don't know why I'm cagey about the date. It's going to drop May 18th.
Okay.
I actually did the work of scheduling out in advance and looking at my calendar in a constructive, useful way, rather than just letting time just take me, which is how I've kind of run the show for the last 7.
So we did really get a little bit of a reveal then today, didn't we? We got the date.
Well, yeah. It'll be out May 18th, 25o'clockpod.com, or anywhere you get podcasts, anywhere that that you pull your podcasts down from, you'll find me, except Spotify.
Suzanne's interviewer skills are extracting information that the
I
public.
know. See, I know. If I had enough time, I was going to reel something in.
Right.
It was the date, but hey, I got something, right?
It took an hour and a half, or plus, but we got to it. That's it. We're good now. That's all we need.
I know. And John, this is probably our longest podcast, so I know you're thrilled. I know you want to go for Rogan time.
Oh,
but,
God. Oh, no. No one wants to hear me talk for that long.
Well,
please.
people put Rogan on at work.
I tell them.
People put Rogan on. I've seen a lot of young people just put Rogan on at work, and they just play Rogan for hours on end at work, and it's okay for them.
It's to each their own. I don't feel bad taking pot shots at Joe Rogan because he's
I
put him on when I was painting, when I had to paint my house, and I wasn't going to go over and have time to sit there and mess with the station or whatever I was listening to. I just put in a Rogan.
Yeah. I guess
he paved a path, man. I mean, he really set a standard. So
yeah, no, he was an early adopter. Good for him on that.
Not sure about the Spotify thing now, but that's a whole different,
That's Spotify has gotten into podcasts now, and they have some great programs, and they got some other stuff I'm not here to toot their horn in any way at all. They've got plenty of other things to do that for them.
Yeah. So, but we are here to toot your horn. So 25 o'clock pod and 25o'clockpod.com and Dan Drago. And we're looking forward to your 200th episode, as I'm sure that you are. And thank you for everything that you're doing to really help grow our music community, our art community. Because like John said, we're art small, news small, vote small, eat small, and shop small. And what else do we do small, John?
Well, I don't know. Everything. We think big and act small. That's it.
Yeah. Think big and act small. And we're and it's not just small, it's accessible. And think about what's accessible to you, and what do I want to see continue in my community, and that's where we want to throw our support behind. So again, we are excited to have had you today, Dan, and this has been the Citizen Bodycast, and we'll see you on the next program. Thanks a lot for tuning in.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Yep.